Welcome to Global Child Forum's event on family-friendly policies. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to introduce our esteemed panel of experts who will engage in an insightful discussion regarding these policies and their profound impact on children, families, working parents, employers, and the economy. My name is Katarina Mellström, and I'm Secretary General of Global Child Forum. And today we are broadcasting from our office in the heart of Stockholm. And we have external speakers from Brussels, Geneva, and Omaha, Nebraska. And they will share their insights and experiences with us. Family-friendly policies encompass various measures that support parents and caregivers throughout the journey from pregnancy to when their children reach school age. These policies include paid parental and sick leave, support for breastfeeding, access to affordable and high-quality childcare, flexible work options, and minimum social protection measures. The advantage of these policies for children are diverse and significant, including reduced rates of infant and childhood illnesses, enhanced cognitive and educational achievements, and early establishment of psychological security during a crucial state of their growth. But, and I would like to stress this, it is important to remember that these policies are not charitable acts by employers towards their staff. We have more than enough data today to point to the fact that family-friendly policies make sense for businesses to attract top talent, reduce absenteeism, and lower recruitment costs. I invite you to actively participate in our webinar today by using the Q&A function and ask questions while our speakers deliver their presentations. Our moderator, Sean O'Shea, is eager to engage with the panel and will strive to address as many of your questions as possible during the discussions. Today, we look forward to hear from Monique Garçon, Global Human Rights Senior Manager at Samsung. She has over a decade of experience in guiding enterprises in their human rights due diligence journey. Monique provides technical guidance to internal core teams on policies, procedures, internal capacity building efforts, and she has been integral in implementing many of these policies that we will be discussing here today. We will also hear from Anita Gergel, early childhood and private sector specialist at the International Financial Corporation, who co-leads the new Care to Equal project, focus on childcare, elderly care, mental health and well-being, following the recently concluded Global Tackling Childcare project. Anita joined the World Bank Group in 2014, working in pre-primary, basic and technical education in Africa and Europe. Lastly, we are privileged to have Jim Harter, the Chief Scientist for Gallup's Workplace Management and Wellbeing Practices, joining us. Jim is the author of best-selling books like It's the Manager, which reached the top of the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post's lists. 12, The Elements of Great Managing was another book, a New York Times bestseller. Jim's expertise lies in cultivating and leveraging employee engagement. And James' upcoming book is titled Culture Shock, and it is to be released in the coming weeks. And in this book, he explores how COVID-19 pandemic has permanently transformed workplace culture. that is anticipated to be another remarkable bestseller. So with that, let me thank our speakers and you, the audience, for joining us. And by that, I pass the word over to Monique. Monique, please.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the invitation for Samsung to this webinar. I would like to turn to the first slide for the introduction of Samsung. I don't think we need a huge introduction as a company. We belong to the Samsung Group, where we have insurance, heavy industry, and others, but Samsung Electronics is its own legal entity. And we are very much known for being headquartered in South Korea and known for producing not only electronic products like mobile phones, laptops, TVs, but also we are in the semiconductor business. So we produce chips, home appliances as well, such as refrigerators. Maybe a few figures here. We operate in 74 countries worldwide, where we employ more than 270,000 employees in regional offices, sales offices, production sites, R&D, design centers. And unlike many other industry peers, we actually have a vertically integrated business model. And that basically means that we have 90% that we produce in-house in our own production sites, of which we have 31 across the globe, and that allows us to have more transparency and oversight over our own operation. And then we have across roughly 2,100 first-tier suppliers. It's actually the slide before, I think, if I see this correctly. But now, yes, yeah, actually now we can go to the next one, sorry. Thank you. A word to our policies. So we actually have a human rights framework, and that is very much centered around our work to identify, prevent, and mitigate human rights risk factors and violations. And this is based on international human rights standards and principles, such as the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, the OECD MNE guidelines, the ILO conventions, and others. And here we focus on the elements of governance, stakeholder engagement, transparency and reporting, access to remedy, due diligence, as well as policies that we have in place. And the policies is very much what we are talking about today. So what we do here as part of the policies is to have a public commitment to the outside world that provides basically a basis for us to embed the responsibility to respect human rights throughout our business operations, but really also we utilize it to facilitate internally our messaging to our staff and to our key internal stakeholders. And here we commit to provide an environment that takes into account the needs of pregnant and child nursing women, which is reflected in our own code of conduct and our supplier code of conduct, but we also have made commitments to provide various employee benefits and programs in order to improve the quality of our employees' lives, such as in our business code of conduct, and bringing this back really to the commitment to the SDG number 5, which is standing for the support to achieve gender equality by 2030. And we all know that this goal has been very much falling behind also since the pandemic. On the next slide, I would like to walk you a little bit through the various family-friendly policies and programs that we do have in place. So we do believe that taking care of our employees also really means to take care of our business. So in line with this philosophy and the commitment that I previously outlined, we have a number of policies and programs in place. One would be related to leave, where we have paid sick leave, but also child a caregiver and parental leave, meaning women and men to support them, whether they have a newly born, adopted, or a placed child. The length here very much depends on the geography. Just to give you an example, here in Korea, we provide, instead of, for example, legally mandated 1 year, up to 2 years. For parental leave, we also provide paternity leave, fertility treatment leave, and extended childcare leave. Another element would be healthcare benefits. So we do cover the medical expenses for employees, their spouses, or children to promote their employees' health. We also actually expanded our efforts in terms of mental health services, including psychologists, as we have seen during the pandemic, that this was as we all have seen, really was an area where more work was needed. But also when it comes to reproductive health support, depending on the geography, we also support, for example, the transportation cost that may occur to our employees when they move to other areas for surgery, which cannot be operated within a 100-mile radius of their residence. This is particularly the case where we see, legal requirements do not really align with the commitments that we have been doing. Then in terms of programs, we have very different programs. I'm not going to go into all of them, but they're basically really trying to support child carers and the extended family in their efforts from childcare centers. So also here, depending on the country, in Korea, for example, we have 15 in-house daycare centers with a total capacity of 3,300 children. We have also lactation or so-called mommy rooms in all our production sites with a proper infrastructure. In Vietnam, for example, we have 22 of them, also with obstetrics and gynecologists. And we have other different programs in place to support with adoption assistance, also to get the breast milk home while traveling for employees in certain regions, or also caregiver and emotional support throughout the family building journey. And last but not least, also a training program, a train the trainer program, which we have been doing, for example, in our biggest production site in Vietnam, to support the mental health, but also reproductive journey of our employees there. Living wage is not per se a family-friendly policy, according to us, but I do mention it because I do think that remuneration can be seen as a contributor to employee well-being, less excessive overtime, which contributes to child well-being and the coverage for needs of employees' families, according to the definition of the anchor methodology. And here we have been undertaking some work in our production sites to calculate with a third party, close the gaps, and we are in the process of really finalizing this process. Then when it comes to due diligence, as I mentioned before, so of course also in our code of conduct, we make sure that pregnant women and nursing mothers doing work in the work environment and the type of work is allowed, is implemented and is checked in self-assessments, internal audits and third-party audits via the RBA. But we also understand that the scope is oftentimes limited. So what we have done last year is basically introduced for the first time a gender self-assessment toolkit. And this basically consists of 144 indicators based on the UN Women's Empowerment Principles, the RBA VIP protocol, the World Benchmarking Alliance gender benchmark methodology, as well as stakeholder inquiries that we have been receiving over the past on this topic. And so this includes a lot of different topics, including also maternity support. And here 20 of our production sites in 15 countries have completed this self-assessment, and we're currently working on identifying and closing the gaps for the improvement areas. But we have also developed last year a gender equality essential guide, and that covers different elements, including also maternity support. And what we do currently is we try to track our operations, how our operations are integrating those elements. And we will continue to do so, and we will then also explore opportunities to apply this potentially to our supply chain in the coming years. And last but not least, I would mention access to remedy from my side. And so what we have seen during the pandemic is that there is a gender-based violence increase of 50% in South America, which was also reflecting the UN Women's statistics. And we therefore decided to open up our grievance channel also to domestic violence. And so here what we do is we support women, whether it be changing working times, the bus lanes if they stay with other family members, support with the police if needed, and also time off, which in turn, of course, also positively impacts the health and well-being of their family. And one I think I jumped over was flexible working environment. And so here we saw also an increase in performance during the pandemic. So we have expanded also our company policy from 1 day to 2 days, but in reality, it's much more flexible. But we have also other initiatives, including reduced working hours for childcare and a family day in South Korea. But I I will stop here for the moment.
Thank you so much, Monique. I will go next. This is Anita Gurgel with IFC, the International Finance Corporation, which is the private sector arm of the World Bank. It's a pleasure to be here today discussing family-friendly workplaces, why it makes sense for companies to do this. We heard from Monique, we've heard from Katarina as well. This is not charity, there's a business case behind it. And how can companies actually go about implementing some of these policies? So at IFC, I co-lead an initiative called Care to Equal, which aims, among other things, to expand the understanding among the private sector on the outcomes associated with employer-supported childcare and family-friendly policies. I won't go, into any, extensive remarks about, family-friendly policies. We've heard in practice what this looks like from Monique. We know that, this includes anywhere from paid leave, which we hope, will cover men and women, different, family configurations, including same-sex couples, to safe transportation, as Samsung does, or support to transportation in some cases, flexible work arrangements, which have become much more popular or had gotten a lot more attention after COVID, which can be flexible working hours, flexible locations, can be sometimes flexible roles or a combination of all these. Lactation support, of course, as Monique mentioned, which means both, the break for women to breastfeed or extract milk, but also the space that's safe, healthy, clean for women to do so and to store milk for their children later on. Instead, I'll actually focus on employer-supported childcare. But of course, employer-supported childcare does not exist in a vacuum. It's usually a part of this larger set of policies and initiatives, right? So here in the screen, you see just some highlights, some of the impacts that our colleagues at UNICEF have compiled for some of these policies. I'll now go on and talk a little bit more about employer-supported childcare. We can move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So as I mentioned, we focus quite a bit on the outcomes, right? Raising awareness about this, because childcare in large part is a responsibility of the public sector, right? And this is undeniable, but employers do have a role to play in this space, right? Especially given the global crisis around this topic, right? And the benefits that are to be enjoyed by a different set of stakeholders, right? So in terms of outcome for children, access to quality childcare, and here I think it's really important to highlight the quality piece, right? It needs to be of decent quality for some of these benefits to be enjoyed. Help keeps children safe, helps support their development, both cognitive and physical, their learning, and in some cases enables access to health and nutrition that might not necessarily be available at home. At the same time, the World Bank report that we published last year estimated that more than 43% of all children below primary school entry age around the world, that's about 350 million children, need childcare, but do not have access to it. So there's definitely benefits and demand for childcare. We're still working on the supply in different locations. In terms of outcomes related to families, to women, to female labor force participation, we know that women spend on average 3.2 times more on paid care work than men. So this, of course, it's a disproportionate caregiving responsibilities that gets in the way of women participating more actively in the labor force if they wish, can reduce their careers prospects, can cause a series of unintended consequences. A World Bank study, another one in last year in Indonesia, found a strong positive association, a positive impact of childcare availability on women's employment. There are several studies on this. That particular one found that an additional public preschool per 1,000 children in a particular district in Indonesia increased women's work participation by 9.1%. So the evidence is there. So the accessibility to this kind of care, that's affordable, that is of quality, can indeed give women choice and empower them in a variety of ways. Next is its outcomes for businesses. And again, this is something that we really focus on, being the International Finance Corporation. Our clients are corporations or businesses. And the type of outcomes that we typically see are related to recruitment and retention, typically of female employees, but of other employees as well. It can lead to a more diverse workforce and other benefits that come with this. There are benefits related to employee relations. A strong set of family-friendly policies is associated with high employee satisfaction. We see evidence of impact in absenteeism rates related to families lacking reliable childcare and then having access to it, which can lead to improved productivity for companies. Another study, an IFC study a couple of years ago, showed that businesses in the public sector in Fiji are losing an average of 12.7 work days. That's almost 13 work days per employee per year due to the responsibilities of working parents, right? In some countries, this is also a matter of legal compliance. At least 26 economies around the world mandate their employers to provide some type of childcare support to employees. This is usually triggered by number of employees, sometimes by number of women employees, ideally by number of employees in general. Finally, last but not least, employee supported care can also help boost a corporate reputation if it's done well. And just to finish up for now, in terms of outcomes for the economy, in addition to this impact that is derives from firms' increased productivity, expanding the childcare economy to meet the current needs would generate an estimated 43 million jobs globally. A lot of these jobs going to women. So there are widespread benefits to investments in this area. So I think the business case is well established. Several outcomes for different groups of stakeholders. I look forward to discussing a little bit more on the how during the panel. Thank you. I pass it on to Jim.
Thank you, Anita, and thank you, Monique, for such a thorough review. One thing I'd like to discuss with you here briefly is the impact of culture on family-friendly in workplaces. And I want to highlight a study that was published in academia by Ron Getzel at Johns Hopkins and 21 of his colleagues. A three-decade-long study looking at wellness programs and their impact. And the question was, do they really have impact in the way they're intended? And as an example, what they found is that the answer is yes if you have an organizational culture that facilitates success. And so one takeaway is that policy is, of course, extremely important, but it's not enough if we don't have an organizational culture that supports it. So I want to make 3 points here. One is, we need an organizational framework that makes sense to employees when we are delivering policy, so they know where it fits and how it fits into the organization's overall view of their well-being. 2, we need some system of accountability so that we know what's working and what isn't. And 3, we need great managers who build trust so they can direct people to the right resources, and only managers are in a position to really know what's going on in each person's lives. This first slide here, I wanted to highlight some work we've done at Gallup globally. A question we asked ourselves was, are there some dimensions of well-being that are generalizable, that work across the world, that individuals and organizations can do something about? And these are the 5 that we came up with that were generalizable statistically across the world, and that we can all act on and do something about. The career component, of course, and whether people like what they do every day, and do they have an engaging career? And organization, of course, can have a big impact on that. That's oftentimes very foundational to whether people have trust and they are open-minded to the various policies that the organization is offering them. Of course, social well-being is important, and whether people have meaningful friendships in their life, family-friendly, fits right into that dimension. But it's also influenced by all these others. Financial well-being, there's discussion about affordability earlier. Are people able to manage their money well so they can reduce stress and have longer term security? Physical well-being, do they have enough energy to get things done on a daily basis they want to get done? That's of course impacted by some of these policies we're talking about. And community well-being in terms of individuals liking where they live. Our research would suggest that when these 5 areas, when individuals are thriving in these 5 areas, they have significantly lower rates of diagnosed depression, lower burnout, often and always, and lower anxiety rates. And we're seeing right here in the US, you'll see a report coming out real soon that shows increases in diagnosed depression and treatment for depression, like a 10-point increase, which we hadn't seen historically, particularly influenced women and younger people right now are seeing that increase the greatest in some minority groups. And so paying attention to these kinds of dimensions are really important because they reduce the chance of, again, depression rates go down from 37% to 3% if these 5 elements are, if individuals are thriving in these 5 elements, and anxiety goes down from 44% to 9%. So some pretty meaningful impacts if we have an organizing structure that individuals and the organization as a whole can act on through both policies and what happens day to day. Let's go to the next slide, please. So this is kind of a busy slide, but I want to give it as an example of how we can think about accountability when we develop policies inside organizations. And one is just to look at, you see on the x-axis here, this is the percentage of people who say they would change jobs for a particular perk or benefit. We could put other variables on that x-axis, like the overall well-being of the individuals from a measurement standpoint. But this is just whether they would change a job for it, and the y-axis is really whether the employer provides that or not. So you can see there are a number of areas, some that people would change jobs for that aren't offered as often, like bonus pay flex time is an example of that. Less than half of people in this survey said that their organization offers it, but it's clearly an area that someone would change a job for. You can see paid sick days, health insurance. These are all relevant to our discussion here today. Paid time off and vacation time, 401k. So there's clearly some areas here that impact whether people would stay or leave an organization. That some are offered more often than others. Health insurance is offered the most, but it's a way to kind of think about what we're currently offering and how it relates to decisions people make about their overall lives and the workplaces that they end up being in. Let's go to the next slide, please. And then finally, I want to leave you with a point here about let's go on to the next one, about the manager, why the manager is so important. Managers are really in the only position in organizations where they can get to know the individual situations of each person. And so much of what leads to high well-being is individually specific. So we can offer policies, but are employees really going to trust their manager to direct them in the right place? Some people won't even be aware, even though they're stated, they're published, they may not even be aware that a policy exists or know how to utilize it to the best possible way. So a point I want to leave you with here is that it does start with work. It starts with how we do work on a daily basis, and whether people are involved in setting their own goals, and whether they have clear expectations for work so they don't come to work frustrated, whether their manager continually coaches them by having at least one meaningful conversation with them every week. And that can include recognizing them, but it can include helping them set goals, how they collaborate with their colleagues. Those all build efficiencies that allow someone to lead a more effective overall life. And it also includes the strengths of each person and how each person's somewhat different, and how work can be tailored to that individual and their situation. And I talked about earlier accountability, so people know how well they're doing. These all build positive affect, they build high levels of engagement, and they build trust, so that people are more likely to take advantage of the resources that the organization offers them, and are able to see the connection between what's offered them and the bigger picture. And so when we have effective management inside organizations, employees are freed up to utilize what's available to them. And there's also some authenticity in the culture about what's actually done. So in some cultures, even though benefits might be provided, it may be a bit taboo, or it may be the culture kind of works against it by making people feel guilty about utilizing those benefits that are available to them. But if we have an engaging culture inside an organization, there is trust and there's some authenticity to really utilizing benefits that including family-friendly benefits that become honored and respected inside the organization because they lead to greater outcomes in the long run. I'll stop there, and I think we can go on back to Sean next.
Thank you so much, Jim, Anita, and Monique. Before we move on, I just want to remind you that you can pop your question into the chat, and we'll try and get to it. Maybe this has spurred some thoughts and you want to dig a bit deeper. Just before we go into that discussion, I wanted to highlight some of the support that we offer. If you don't know me already, I saw some familiar faces. I'm Sean O'Shea, and I'm the Corporate Engagement Manager here at Global Child Forum. And part of my role is to show you some of these fantastic tools that we have available. And as you can see on your screen, I've highlighted just some of the guidebooks that we have available. There's no cost, no subscription, very easy to get hold of. And we'll be sharing these links with you in the coming days, along with some links from our colleagues who've joined this panel today. Next slide, I can just highlight some of the other ones. We also have a range of company cases, so you can really read in depth about what kind of examples have been done. And it's really useful tools and super easy to navigate around. So please do check those tools out. I think now we can dig a bit deeper into some of those questions that have been buzzing around inside, and start to have a look and discuss further. So I'm going to start with you, Monique. Could you explain why Samsung viewed these policies as desirable, and what has the process been like so far as the implementation of them has been concerned?
Thank you so much, and I think we have heard already quite a lot of and rich insights from Jim and Anita as to the business case. And for us, there's of course also a business case. So of course, as a global company, we adhere to the legal requirements, but as you have seen, as I presented earlier, it goes much further than this, right? So we do much more than the legal requirement, which is just the bare minimum, and there are really strong business cases for us to do so. And I would divide this into two dimensions. One would be the worker level. So we do know that supporting the well-being and health of our workers and their families enables simply also a better work-life balance and a better career choice for women, which we know is an issue, but it simply also leads to more and better workplace satisfaction, increased trust. And that was mentioned also before. I think trust is a very important one, also for you to be able to utilize, to understand, to know, and to really put in practice what is available to you. And then there's also the element of physical and mental capacity to even be available for work in the best and most efficient way, which is of course also relevant to us as an employer. And I think if you have an issue to really take care of your children or other basic needs, then this element will become an overall issue. And then simply also occupational health and safety, which includes also mental health, is a human right. It's a human right for every a worker, and that is something that we have seen last year also being expanded, in the human rights world, and that is very important, I think, also to consider. But then when we come back to the company level, employee health and satisfaction simply also leads to increased performance, to employee engagement. We know that it reduces the amount of workers being absent, and therefore really leads to an overall better business performance. Another element that was also already mentioned before is that it retains and attracts talent. I think especially as a company during the pandemic, we have seen, or post-pandemic, also that there is a very high demand for more flexible working models, not only related to family, the family dimension, but really also beyond. So it's surely also something very important for businesses to consider. And combined and really linked to that also to remain competitive in the marketplace and to increase your brand reputation. And last but not least, in terms of the business model, I would say for Samsung, we consider ourselves sort of a very large family business. So it's very important for us as a company. Also, we value long-term employment, and we seek to create employee loyalty. So therefore, trust and taking care of your people becomes somewhat natural then, and it's very much needed. When it comes to the implementation of the policy, once you have a commitment in place, then the hard work starts. So every commitment then requires really a proper implementation, and that means having a proper process in place to implement the commitment, involving really different key internal stakeholders whose job it's then also to really raise awareness on the worker side of what their rights are and which benefits they can make use of. We heard previously from Jim that there may be sometimes a contradiction between what's there. If you have a policy, doesn't necessarily mean that, you know, it's known. So that's a very critical element. So apart from many things being in contracts, and then in addition having company guidelines, we also organize therefore orientation sessions for workers when they start their jobs, so they can utilize their benefits to their best advantage. And then we also provide on a regular basis, on a yearly basis, and even more so when it comes to specific target groups within the organization, also human rights training overall. A last word to implementation, I would say, is what is very important is to be part of business networks and to learn from best practices, and to be part of key organizations like the Responsible Business Alliance we are part of, dedicated conferences on those topics, but really also, for example, the Global Child Forum has come in very handy. And last year we had a full year in the Business Academy where, you know, with industry leaders, we discussed quite a range of those topics. And I think it's very useful towards implementation, because also we, of course, don't have all the answers. So it's always good to exchange and learn from one another, and to really share also challenges, but also opportunities with others.
Yep, fantastic. And we do, as you mentioned, run a business academy and workshops. And if you're interested in joining those kind of programs, please do reach out to us. The contact details will be shared. Jim, I'm looking at the list of participants, and I can see a lot of people who are management. And I think as part of that kind of, what do you need to do to successfully integrate these types of policies? Like, how do you create the necessary internal culture to make them work?
Yeah, great question, and really love the comments by Monique, and all the work that Samsung's doing. It's just excellent. So, you know, before the pandemic arrived, flex time was the most desired perk by people, is the most sought after, and suddenly people in a couple of years' time had quite the interaction with flex time, at least for people in remote ready jobs, and even people in on-site jobs had a lot of different thought processes. It isn't like people in on-site jobs don't need autonomy, you know? And so I think a lot of employers have been thinking about how you build a culture so there is some flexibility even in required on-site jobs. And so I've had a lot of discussions with leaders with regards to that. And flex time certainly one of them, and how you make that work effectively. But I would say, Sean, there's kind of three things to be thinking about if you want to build the right kind of culture that honors the policies that you're putting in place and really gets people on the right page to utilizing them. And one is we got to start with leadership, and the purpose of the organization overall has to be well articulated, and the intended culture needs to be well articulated, and how what they're providing to people makes sense. And the reason for those offerings, to articulate why a family-friendly workplace actually benefits not only the altruistic side of things and the individuals and their own well-being, but also the businesses, has been mentioned. When people come to work with high well-being, they just bring more energy. And I think leadership needs to clearly articulate that. The second that I think is very actionable, and we've seen this work in organizations, is to upskill managers to have the right kind of conversations with people, to be able to leverage the strengths of each person and get to know some of those innate tendencies that we all differ on, and to put those in the context of not only well-being, but also to be thinking about how employee engagement fits inside of that and how performance management fits inside of that, and not to be thinking of them as separate kind of entities, but that they're all integrated into how managers do their jobs. And we need to simplify the role of manager, because we're seeing managers reporting higher levels of stress than the people that they manage. And so they need to be upskilled, so not only their jobs are better, but also so that they're equipped to have the right kinds of ongoing conversations with people, so they're in touch with them and can provide the right guidance for individuals and the right adjustments to work for individuals. And that doesn't have to work against the business. In fact, if it's done right, it will work for the business. And then finally, I think we need to have a dashboard in place so we know how well we're doing and know what kind of progress we're making. We've had a couple decades, almost 3 decades of work in tracking employee engagement around the world. That's one piece of the puzzle. We think there's other dashboard elements that are just as important now for this new workforce. One is whether people feel they're treated with respect at work. That's a DEI area, but it's extremely important. And if you don't get that right, then it really causes some dissension on the part of employees, and they're not likely to take advantage of all the offerings that are provided. Also, just whether people feel their organization cares about their well-being, that's an indicator. We saw early on in the pandemic, organizations were very responsive, and that percentage went way up, and it's since dropped significantly. And so I think organizations can do a lot, and that starts with the messaging from leadership, but it also is in how managers activate it on an everyday basis for employees. And then also, I think we can track whether managers are having the right kinds of ongoing meaningful conversations with people, and so that people do get the right kinds of feedback that inspire them to high levels of performance on an ongoing basis. So I think those are some of the things I think about with culture, and it kind of comes back to the purpose of the organization, how family friendly fits into that, well articulated, how we upskill managers effectively, add on to their current skills, and then have the right metrics in place to track progress.
Fantastic. Anita, now moving to a question for you. What are some practical guidance that you can give to companies on implementing these family-friendly policies, especially like employer-supported childcare? Perhaps you've got an example.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sean. Yeah, so I mean, I think what Jean was just saying, right? Aligning things with, any policies, any programs obviously need to fit, the goal of the organization, the culture of the organization, right? What is the purpose here? So, I mean, I know it's common sense, but what are some of the issues organizations are trying to solve, right? What specific issues? Is it an issue with rotation? Is it absenteeism? It's a lack of diversity in the workforce. So this is the basic point from where to start. We strongly recommend that companies invest in collecting data. Here we're talking about basic data on the issues they are trying to provide assistance with. A lot of times it's very common for us to see companies that know they wanted to do something, started doing, and then they can't really go back and remember or have the data to back up how things were before, and now how do they compare to the results that could be associated with some of these policies. In the case of employer-supported childcare, for example, we recommend that companies run a simple childcare needs assessment to understand what employees' needs are, what their preference, their current arrangements, for example, do they prefer to keep their children in a center close to home, or do they prefer to have them close to themselves at the job? Do they prefer to keep them at home or in an institutional setting? Can families afford a certain type of care? What are their concerns, right? Trust is a big issue with childcare. So understanding, having baseline data is really important to show improvement over time, to help guide what a solution will be, right? The worst thing is to come up with a solution that doesn't really, match the issue at hand, and to show that investment is actually generating results, right? It's paying off for those involved. It's also important to understand the resources that are already available in a community, no matter how resource-strapped, how difficult the community or the setting is, there are usually some type of resources, right? Companies do not have to go it alone. It's often possible and advisable to partner with others with expertise in the topic. For example, again, in the case of childcare, are there providers in the region? Do they need a certain level of quality? Do they have services that are affordable for the income level of your employees? Can you find a partner to work with them in your region? And also, I think Monique mentioned this a little bit, the importance of networks, right? Of hearing from others, the examples of others, right? Where did they struggle? How did they overcome that? And what really motivated them? For example, you ask if there's examples. There are many examples. IFC has a series of case studies. I'll cite one that we wrote last year about a Mexican agribusiness with over 7,000 employees. After a few years ago, they started expanding quite rapidly in a few regions. With that came some rotation issues. They wanted to also ensure that the benefits spoke to the real needs of the employees. This is Grupo Altex, by the way. You found it's a publicly available case. They found a great partner called Hippocampus. They partner with them. And currently they have 5 child care centers in the different locations. One of them is actually for suppliers, small strawberry growers in some remote part of Mexico. And for that company, they were very explicit that it did not make sense for them. If they were to go it alone, it would be a challenge, right? Like lack the technical expertise. They felt more comfortable partnering with an early childhood development expert to deliver a benefit that they thought would be important. And the leadership was also very outspoken and welcoming of questions. Again, what Monique was saying, the importance of CEOs and HR directors, whoever is involved in this, to speak to others, right, and get the pros and the cons and the real deal, right. So we highly recommend some type of peer learning or benchmarking. I know the Global Child Fund is wonderful with this. It's also important to understand, at baseline, what are you mandated to do, right? I mean, at a minimum, you should be meeting, you should be acting according to the law. Cost is also an issue, right? IFC's mandate is to work with employers in emerging markets, but anywhere, everywhere, it's an issue. It requires a lot of effort, investments. So it's important to understand what are the different options and what are the costs associated with that, right? For example, having an on-site child care center is certainly not the solution for everyone, certainly not the solution for most employers, right? For a variety of reasons, including cost, space, and so on. But you can partner with someone else. You can do a top-up. You can provide an allowance, right? These have different costs. So the important thing is actually to get started, and data can be an important way of helping you get there. I'll stop here.
Time is really running away from us, but Monique, if you could just briefly say, what has Samsung learned is important for the implementation of these policies?
Yeah, thank you very much. So again, we don't have all the answers by any means here, but and we have still a journey ahead ourselves, of course. And what I presented, depends also on the region and the geography, but I think we have a couple of learnings here that I would like, that I would be happy to share. And so one is that we have really learned that one size doesn't fit all. So it really depends where, how, depending on the local needs. It was mentioned by Anita, not in every single building, maybe even it may be suitable to have all those options. So it's really a matter of localizing and identifying the needs and really having a company-wide understanding and strategy as a whole where we want to go. And that is also very much related to what was said earlier. So having the buy-in and also raising internal awareness on practices and programs, because it will come with an initial and an ongoing financial investment. And wherever there is a financial investment, there needs to be a good why in place. And so here, this very much goes over into the need for capacity building, key human rights roles and HR people to put then the seemingly separate projects into an overall context on why we are trying to promote employee well-being and satisfaction and human rights. And so that comes very much back to the overall company purpose and strategy that was also mentioned earlier. And so here it's very important to liaise internally, which can be, frankly speaking, also a challenge. If you're a very large organization and you have many different regional headquarters and a global headquarter and production sites. So really setting up also internal networks, not only participating externally, but in our experience, we're really also having those internal networks, guidance tools and trainings help. So we have, for example, frequently regional HR meetings where we have best practice sharing among ourselves, but where we also pull in external ones. Then really also about staying alert of internal needs and external developments. And lastly, but very importantly, is the workers' voice. So it's really important to pull in workers and rights holders themselves into the process, or where you can't, to have proxies. So we have really an ecosystem here in place. And we, of course, have works councils in our global workplaces, 46 of them, 32 trade unions, more than 290 internal and third-party grievance channels. And that I would like to highlight, in addition to the more formal ones, informal engagement in our view is also very important, because this is where the trust is built. Because usually for the ones where it's more of a level of an escalation in terms of a grievance channel, it's perhaps already too late. They're very important, but the informal ones, where there is the trust really to have this engagement with HR in a more direct manner, is very important. And what we also do on a yearly basis, we have the so-called Samsung Cultural Index survey, which is anonymous, and which is very important also to our top management, where we have cultural questions, but also questions around the topics that we have been talking about here today. And this basically leads to a gap analysis on local level, what needs to be done, and then we pull in also worker representatives where we're present into this process. So really utilizing this is very important.
Great, very in-depth explanation there. I think as time is kind of about to end, perhaps we'll wrap up now, and I'd like to give you each a last word or final remark or advice that you would give the audience on these policies, or how they could implement them, or kind of what's the takeaway from this. Jim, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I would reinforce that there's really kind of three areas that I think are important in making policies work. And this comes from, studying how benefits and policies tend to be utilized inside of organizations, whether they're wellness programs or vacation time and all those kinds of things. And one is for leadership to articulate why it's important to the culture they desire to build in a very authentic way, so people can see that it's not just a check the box kind of thing that an organization is doing, but it's real, and it really reflects what the organization is trying to be about. And I'd also reinforce that we've got to have managers inside organizations that are talking to people on a regular basis, and that we're integrating performance management and employee engagement into some of these same concepts. And then I think we need a dashboard for accountability going forward.
Right. No, I think communication definitely seems to be a theme that's run through this in points that have been made. Anita, your kind of final word on this.
Sure, absolutely. I would highlight the importance of designing policies that are inclusive, so that, of course, it has the intended concept, the intended benefits, right? Yeah. Companies do this thinking they will bring benefits, but it's really important not to alienate certain groups of employees. In the specific case of employer-supported childcare, it's really important to explicitly include men. If you're hoping to lower barriers for your female employees, or you're looking to increase female pool of candidates, this is often treated as a woman's issue, but it's a family's issue, right? It's a society issue. So engaging men, it's critical, it's essential. They do have a role in caregiving. Companies are well positioned to raise awareness among employees on different topics, why they are doing so. So, you know, they are working, they are looking to support, for example, in this case, working parents in general, not just women, right? And we know it takes effort and resources and time to, you know, put something together like Samsung is doing, right? You don't have to do everything at the same time, right? It's important to begin and to remember that it is an ongoing journey, right? Continuous improvement. Start with the lowest hanging fruit if you have to, or the most critical issue for you. And I'll just leave you with a very quick quote from one IFC CEO that we worked with in Africa, that family-friendly policies are an employer-supported childcare. It's not something that you do when your business is doing well. It's something that you do so your business can do well, right? I mean, I think that the shift in thinking is important.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I mean, the examples that Monique and you have given show that this is not about just spending money. It's, you can be a successful business, you can still be innovative, and this doesn't cost. It's complementary to running a great business and having success. Monique, any final comments for the audience?
Yeah, thank you. I like what you said, Anita, to pull in men, because I think that goes overall. There is no women empowerment work without men. I truly believe in that, and I've learned also really a lot from the other panelists today in terms of how to really better our process in a way. I would say from my side, really engaging with stakeholders, workers is very important. As mentioned before, engaging also with industry peers. And lastly, I would say it's very important to know the why to get to the how, because it really all starts with the why. And once you have an understanding of the positive impact and the business case, I think the why you will figure out along the way.
Fantastic. I think we could probably have gone on for another hour or even longer. This has brought up so many interesting questions and points. I'd just like to finish up by saying thank you so much to Jim, Anita, and Monique, and the team at Global Child Forum who helped put everything together today. We will be sending out an email shortly afterwards with some details and relevant links and things. Do feel free to reach out to us and the panelists if you have follow-up points or questions. I'm sure everyone will be happy to try and help you as best they can. Yeah, and that just leaves me to say thank you so much for joining us, and we very much look forward to engaging with you in another event or on our benchmark. Your scorecards will be coming up shortly, so keep an eye out for those in June. Thank you so much.